What's up everybody, Dr. Rossi, shrinksandSneakers.com. So in this video, I think what I'm going to do for you guys is just discuss briefly schizophrenia. Because no psychiatry channel can go without talking about schizophrenia. It is a serious mental illness and one of the main ones that we as psychiatrists are treating on a regular basis and that you may hear about in popular media and see in movies and television shows. In this video, I'm going to cover it from a very basic standpoint. I'm not going to go into great detail on the nuance points and all the little details, but just give you guys just a general overview on what is schizophrenia, what are the symptoms to look out for, and some of the other small details regarding the disorder. So we're going to go ahead and get right into that video now. Okay, so schizophrenia, we're finally here. First thing to note about schizophrenia is that it is a serious mental illness, and it primarily affects one's ability to think clearly. So this person will not be thinking the way you and I might be thinking, and the way and in a linear fashion that we would be able to follow. And I'll explain more about that in a minute. In general, what age range do we commonly see this disorder? Well, you commonly see schizophrenia in men age 18 to 25. It's usually somewhere in that range. You see the first episode. And of course, these are ranges, and this is generalities, not always the same, not always going to be the case, right? There's exceptions to every rule. Females, 25 to 35 usually for that first episode. And then they have a bimodal distribution where, like around menopause, say age 45 or so, you could also see another spike in the female population of schizophrenia. So 18 to 25 for men, 25 to 35 for women. With that said, the prevalence of schizophrenia worldwide is about 1%, but this research is really crappy, so it's hard to say if it's less than 1%, if it's over 1%, or if it's exactly 1%. The test question is always 1%. However, like I said, there's a lot of variety and variability there, so in general, you just say 1% to make it easy. That brings us to the core features, which I'm going to go over in the next segment. Alright, so core features of schizophrenia. What are the primary symptoms that you should be looking out for? Number 1, hallucinations. Let's start by defining what a hallucination is. So a hallucination is a sensory perception. So this could be sensory being seeing something, right? Visual sensation, auditory. It could be taste. It could be a feeling on my skin, say, or something like that, which we would call tactile. But it's a sensory perception in the absence of any external stimuli. So I'm perceiving that someone's talking to me from the outside, but no one's actually talking. Or I think I'm seeing someone in the corner of the room, but no one's really standing there. Okay? So sensory perception in the absence of external stimuli. In psychiatry, we primarily deal with auditory hallucinations, so this could be hearing voices, the so-called hearing voices, and these voices can be people you know, they can be people you don't know, they can be male, they can be female, there could be one voice, there could be 2 voices, there could be 10 voices. So this varies, and these are all kind of questions that you're going to want to sort out when you're doing a psychiatric history. How many voices? Are they male or female? And then what is the content of what these voices are saying? So some of these voices could be derogatory in nature, they could be command in nature, and it can get dangerous when those command auditory hallucinations are telling you to kill yourself or kill someone else. In those cases, we're going to get worried because you may act on those voices. So that's the auditory hallucinations. Visuals, kind of self-explanatory. If you're seeing people standing in the room who aren't really there, or seeing things that aren't really there, there is a difference between a visual hallucination and an illusion. An illusion is that, you see a string or something on the floor and you think it's a snake, right? So you see this rubber band for exercise sitting on your floor, and you mistakenly think it's a snake, but when you look, you're like, okay, it's not. It's just an exercise band, right? That's an illusion. A visual hallucination, again, you're perceiving someone standing in the room even though when they're not there. So a little different. Tactile hallucinations, I think I've said this before, that can happen with people who are using cocaine. It's called formication. Sometimes this also happens in things like alcohol withdrawal, where you feel like, bugs are crawling on your skin or something like that. And of course, olfactory hallucinations would be sense of smell, so it's burning tires. So commonly some people think that they smell bad or they're emitting a terrible odor even though they're not. So there's olfactory as well. And with that said, I'll move on to the next major core feature, which is delusions. So let's first define what a delusion is. A delusion is a fixed false belief that the person believes to be true even when they're being presented evidence to the contrary. So this is someone who believes something even though you're presenting evidence to say, no, this isn't actually what's happening, right? These are the facts. Delusions in schizophrenia tend to be paranoid or persecutory, or the most common, thinking that someone is following you, someone is out to get you, or someone is doing something to impede your ability to carry out your daily activities and your life, right? So someone is persecuting you, and you're paranoid that somebody is following you. Those are the most common. Of course, there can be other types of delusions as well. And again, this is a fixed false belief. No matter how much you try to convince the person, no matter how much logic you use, no matter how much evidence you provide for support, the person is still not going to think that what you're saying is true. So that's the delusions. The next part is more about the thought process. And remember, I said ultimately this is a person who is thought disordered. So to be thought disordered, how would you know if someone's having a problem with their thinking? Well, in general, conversations like we're having here, you can kind of see where I'm going with this. It's a little bit linear. I'm telling sort of like a narrative story. You can understand what I'm trying to convey. With people with schizophrenia, especially when they're having a psychotic episode, they're going to not be thinking linearly at all. You won't be able to make the normal connections that you would in a conversation. It wouldn't make sense, right? And we may call something like that disorganized. We may call it loosening of associations, right? Where it's kind of difficult to follow how these things are related that the person's talking about, even though in their mind they're seeing it as very interrelated. Okay, so loosening of associations. Another thing that's common with people with schizophrenia is they tend to be very concrete. So what does that mean? So they have concrete thinking. If you were to tell them something like, write a sentence, right? You're doing a neurocognitive exam and you say, can you please write a sentence for me? And the person writes, write a sentence. That's the sentence they write. So they're not getting it, right? They're taking everything very literally or very concretely. So that's one of the other things that we can sometimes see. There's also situations where people will have things like thought blocking, right? And this is common when they're having auditory hallucinations. They're unable to fully concentrate and they're sort of losing track of what they're saying or thinking. Like they'll be telling you something, they'll suddenly pause and then not remember what you're talking about. So those are some of the things we look for. And again, the way they're speaking, not only the disorganized speech, but also disorganized behavior. We're looking for behaviors that, again, just don't really make sense, that just look like they're not organized towards any particular task or goal. And you can observe this, again, when you're working with these patients. The final thing to talk about is negative symptoms. So the negative symptoms are the things like apathy and social isolation. A lot of times, some of the prodromal symptoms with schizophrenia start with the person withdrawing. This is a teenage kid going to college for the first time, realizing that the classes are difficult and that they're struggling a little bit in a high stress environment, away from home for the first time, and they're doing okay initially, but then all of a sudden, their roommates and friends are saying like, well, I haven't seen them in a while. They're just sitting in their room. I've even had a case where somebody was like urinating into jars and not even like leaving the room to go to the bathroom. So very, very strange kind of behavior. But again, looking for that social isolation or social withdrawal, and apathy, just inability to really get motivated to do anything, right? This is some of the things we start to look out for, and those would be called the more negative symptoms. There's also cognitive symptoms, and the cognitive ones can be the most disabling. And that's, again, that inability to think clearly, that inability to concentrate, the inability to remember things as well as you need to function in daily life. So the cognitive symptoms can be very challenging to deal with as well. The prevailing hypotheses for schizophrenia, what's causing it, is we think of it as, it's called the dopamine hypothesis, and this is how a majority of the medications work. Most of the medications that we have for schizophrenia, although there are some new ones we will talk about in the future, work by blocking dopamine. So they block dopamine neurotransmitter, and it seems to be that from a lot of the evidence that we have is that these people have what we would call a hyperdopaminergic state. They have too much dopamine, excess dopamine, and so blocking it will lead to improvement, in particular in the what we call the positive symptoms. So that would be things like hallucinations, positive symptoms of schizophrenia. We already talked about one form of treatment, and that's pharmacotherapy in the form of dopamine blockers. The other type of treatment that can be had for any type of psychiatric illness, including schizophrenia, is some type of psychotherapy, and there are very specific types of psychotherapy for people with schizophrenia, something we can talk about in a future video. So hopefully this information is helpful for you guys to just kind of contextualize a little bit about the disease of schizophrenia and know that it's an extremely debilitating disease that is often lifelong and has sort of a relapse and remitting course. It does improve with medication, and there are some benefits to using medication to improve the quality of life of these individuals. So that's it for this video. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll continue creating content for you.